Heads up, this episode of Schmeitgeist contains some strong language, mentions of disordered eating, and a Kardashian. Just the one.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
So if you missed this, then honestly, good for you. But lately, the story about women's bodies has completely flipped.
Okay, I don't know how to tell you this, but the thick trend, it's out and skinny is back in.
After a decade of being told that we're all beautiful, the body positivity message has mostly evaporated.
Fashion is back where they've always wanted to go back to, which is an extreme thin body shape.
And it's not the first time we've been here. Thinness was idolised all the way through the 90s and the 2000s.
When asked by fashion industry website WWD if she has a motto, Kate replied, "Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels."
When y'all were saying that the early 2000s are like back in style and thin is in again, like all this stuff, I didn't think it was going to be this bad. Did I just enter a time vortex? Is it 2007 here? I don't like it.
And fair enough, because the skinny look is much more than just a look.
We tried this before in the 90s and millions of people developed eating disorders. I had one for like 20 years. We're not doing this again. We're not going back. Our bodies are not trends. Our body shapes are not trends. Fuck off.
But the rebooted pro-thin message isn't really taking notes from anyone. And on social media, under hashtags like WL or what I eat in a day, it's all playing out in real time.
Reasons you're not losing weight. Grabbing a handful to satisfy crave. This is 50 calories. And so is this.
And that has consequences.
Thin white women in particular who participate in what's called body checking, which is essentially like checking your body against other people's bodies.
I think I am the heaviest I've ever been. I weighed myself just now. I don't know how to help myself anymore or how to love myself.
I'm Ange Lavoie-Pierre, and this is Schmeitgeist, the podcast from ABC Everyday that decodes the biggest and weirdest trends in pop culture, coming to you from Gadigal land. And in this episode, we want to know how 10 years of supposed body positivity gave way to fetishized thinness. Or maybe skinny never really stopped being the standard.
Thin never really went out. We just sort of went less thin or more thin. We all agreed to tolerate that there would sometimes be a plus-size person on TV. I am a US size 26. It's not going in, it's not going out. It's always made very clear to me that I am out.
Because all the myths that propped up the original thin ideal are still with us.
If you are not in the French army in the 1800s, the BMI was not designed for you. I don't know how to break this to you, right?
What?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding you.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, no.
On this episode of Schmeitgeist, we're asking if the body positivity movement failed. And why are we still so ready to drink the diet Kool-Aid?
There is something very appealing about the cruel optimism of saying if you can just whittle yourself away to a certain size, everything that you want will be yours.
So a lot of topics we've covered this season have been somewhat on the real side for me. ADHD, ethical non-monogamy. And it's not so much that I'm living this one, but I am one of roughly 2.5 million Australians who have had an eating disorder at some point in their lives. I'm recovered now, but I mention it to make the point that the skinny trend is not abstract for people. It is genuinely scary. And that is how I found myself for the first time in my life paying attention to Kim Kardashian's outfit at the 2022 Met Gala.
This is Marilyn Monroe's dress, and it's 60 years old. I tried it on and it didn't fit me. And so I looked at them and I said, give me like 3 weeks. And I had to lose 16 pounds down today to be able to fit this.
So 16 pounds is about 7 kilos, which again, in case you missed it, she lost in 3 weeks. Not only that, she told us all how she did it.
Kim shared her routine in detail with Vogue, telling the mag, "I would wear a sauna suit twice a day, run on the treadmill, completely cut out all sugar and all carbs, and just eat the cleanest veggies and protein. I didn't starve myself, but I was so strict."
Very 90s of her. And it's not that Kim Kardashian single-handedly brought back pro-skinny culture. The Met Gala moment was more a symptom of something that was already happening well before May of 2022. But it did give some very public permission to that pro-skinny mindset. It also made me feel like the whole 10-year conversation about body positivity had never happened. So to make sure I hadn't hallucinated it, I spoke with Alyx Gorman.
I'm Alyx Gorman. I'm the lifestyle editor of Guardian Australia, and I've been covering fashion for, 15 years now. I'm old.
Haha. That is a big one that we need to emphasize. Not that you're old, but you've been watching fashion for a while now.
Yeah, I went to my first fashion week in 2005 as a high school volunteer and have been back almost every year since in Australia. So that's a long time.
That is a long time. Long enough that Alyx was working in fashion for the end of the last skinny era. Or more accurately, the last time it was socially acceptable to overtly promote thinness.
So working in fashion, casting models, I was taught at a very young age how to body check, not myself, but other people, how to kind of dissect a model's body for each part of it to see if it would work in a shoot.
Not that you had to be in the fashion industry to experience the effects.
Cast your mind back to Australian Idol when Paulini appeared in a gold dress. This was when I was maybe 12 or 13. So this is the messaging I'm absorbing, like early 2000s toxic thinness culture.
This is really hard for me to say, but it's the real world. You should choose more appropriate clothes or shed some pounds. I'm sorry.
Paulini would have been about a size 10 then, but it was completely acceptable to body police and fat shame a size 10 woman on national television.
And trawling the internet for more recent examples of the bad old days, which I wouldn't recommend doing, by the way, I also found this clip from 2012 of Joan Rivers on The Today Show in the US promoting her red carpet show called Fashion Police.
How's the new season kicking off?
Great. We all just came from Fashion Week, and it's been amazing.
Yeah?
Amazing.
A lot of good material?
Yeah, the whole place smells of vomit. That's the only big thing.
It's true.
It does?
No, because we've
so
been
thin.
filming from the tent. And I swear, as each day goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse.
What are people doing here when they're not walking on? Oh, they're trying to purge so they can fit in the clothes.
Purge. And they eat things like...
Allegedly.
They eat things like newspaper dipped in orange juice.
It's tissues. It's
Cotton balls.
Funny. And right around that time, in 2012, body positivity exploded on social media. Not a moment too soon. Worth noting, the body positivity movement actually dates back to the 60s, but the version we now know, or thought we knew, arrived with the influencer wave.
As a big girl in a skinny world, I've noticed that plus-size fashion has come a long way.
Focusing on things about yourself that make you genuinely happy. So if it's a physical thing, you can like your butt. Like, everyone has a great butt. There's no wrong way to have a butt.
There's a really vast misunderstanding that, higher weight people just don't know how to become thin or don't have enough discipline. And in actuality, fat people are not failed thin people.
And on cue, fashion designers from Tommy Hilfiger through to Rihanna started talking publicly about body diversity.
It's always been important to me, even now more than ever before with the adaptive collection. Nobody has done it.
You could be any size and live anywhere in the world and have a lot of style and look great.
My mission is just to have women all over the world feel comfortable and sexy and have fun.
Even magazines made changes. Vogue put a size 16 woman on their cover in 2017. And everyone did it all purely out of the goodness of their hearts.
It's something that proved to be very commercially successful, particularly for brands that don't sell themselves on exclusivity, like more affordable companies kind of showing that they have a diverse size range or showing people of diverse sizes in their advertisements.
I can't wait to share the Ava and Viv collection with my readers. I know they're really looking forward to seeing what we're doing with Target, and to have a brand new plus-size line that Target has really put so much effort into is exciting for them.
Which makes total sense when you consider the fact that the vast majority of the population are not capital T thin. And people said, like, hang on a second. What if instead of celebrating curves and body positivity, we just started thinking about people's bodies a little bit less, started scrutinizing them a little bit less, and then we see body neutrality, where it maybe just doesn't really matter and you don't have to feel any given way about your body. You don't have to celebrate your curves. You don't have to feel great at any size. You can just be a person.
I read this book about body neutrality and just decided that I was completely done trying to lose weight or change my body.
Let's stop commenting on people's bodies in general. Weight loss, weight gain, pregnancy, did she bounce back? Let's just shut the fuck up.
But the moment we're in now is different. Alyx began noticing a shift on social media about 2 years ago.
There was a big TikTok trend that started in 2021 where there would be a soundtrack that would have a beat drop reveal where girls in baggy clothes would suddenly cinch their bodies in, and you would see that they had incredibly waspish waists. On TikTok as well, you're seeing this kind of resurgence of something that I remember back from Tumblr and even before that, LiveJournal, which is body checking, like really close monitoring of your physicality, which is really a sign of disordered eating. The way in which both celebrities and social media is now discussing the granularity and specifics of becoming extremely thin again is something that I haven't seen since magazines used to interview Victoria's Secret angels about what their pre-runway diets would look like. And, you know, we've had close to 10 years of unpacking the notion that thin is an inherent virtue, is a value, is something that everyone should chase. But very, very quickly that has gone away and no one has needed to really explain that thin is good, because we never forgot that cultural messaging because it's been with us for decades and decades and decades. So we haven't done that much unlearning work.
I wanted to ask you about what is driving this. Like, did we just rebound? Because I guess there is this broader trend theory that something happens, then you react against it. That feels too simplistic to me. What do you put it down to?
I mean, it's quite complicated. I think that in many ways it's a reaction to sort of body positivity, size inclusivity. There is something very appealing about the cruel optimism of saying if you can just whittle yourself away to a certain size, everything that you want will be yours. There's something deeply ingrained in particularly Anglo culture about self-deprivation as an inherent virtue.
And projecting control in a, like, this is something I hadn't really thought about, like you were saying about the cruel optimism. We live in a kind of scary, uncontrolled moment. The notion that you have that level of power over your body, over your appearance, you can see why people want to believe it.
Yeah, unfortunately, a highly restrictive diet is something that can give you a sense of agency, power and control in chaotic times.
And if you've ever made a conscientious effort to lose weight and it's worked, you know exactly how addicting that sense of control can be. I definitely do. Which is why it checks out that at least in the first part of the pandemic, there was an increase in eating disorders. And lockdowns are just one item on a long list of destabilizing factors, like housing or climate change, that we've had to live with lately. But Alyx thinks the biggest driver of all here was a medical breakthrough.
So you're talking about Ozempic, the whispered reason behind the sudden sveltness of every highly visible rich person on the planet, most of whom are not admitting to using Ozempic, but some of whom are.
There are a heck ton of celebrities who are rumored, keyword rumored, to be on this drug currently. Kim Kardashian, Adele, Mindy Kaling, Rebel Wilson, Elon Musk, although he may have admitted to taking it. I can't remember.
I've injected about 4 or 5 of my friends with Ozempic. My anti-aging doctor just hands it out to anybody.
Hey guys, it's time for my Ozempic weight loss update. Here I am taking my shot number 6. I am now down 27 pounds in exactly 5 weeks, and I'm super excited.
So Ozempic is the brand, but semaglutide is the name of the drug. It increases feelings of fullness by acting on appetite centers in the brain and slowing stomach emptying. It's officially a type 2 diabetes drug, but doctors do prescribe it for weight loss as well. Sometimes for medical reasons, sometimes for cosmetic. And for a while there, American doctors were prescribing it so widely that there was a global shortage.
You know what's fucked up, though, is I have someone in my life that needs it medically, and it's completely sold out.
Again, though, very few of the celebrities using it are being upfront about that. So to the casual observer, everyone just got skinnier with hard work, which encourages people to try and then beat themselves up when they fail.
It's like the quest for perfect glass skin and thinking that you can get there using beauty products alone when the people who are advertising the beauty products that give you perfect skin are spending $2,000 a month on Fraxel laser treatments. Like, having more economic access makes you better looking.
And if all this seems like bad news to you, because it is, then here is a pretty significant bright spot, at least if you're Australian.
Australia is behind the times, but in the most kind of fantastic, worthwhile way at the moment. In Australia, our Fashion Week, at least, was the single most size and, more broadly speaking, body-inclusive Fashion Week I have ever seen, ever been to. There were more short, super tall, gender diverse, differently abled, plus size, self-described as fat models on the runways at Australian Fashion Week last year than collectively at every other Fashion Week I had ever been to, and then times it by about 4. And that's really nice. I hope we can stay there and keep that momentum going and kind of tune out what's coming in.
And that trend mostly held up at Australian Fashion Week in 2023. Well, there wasn't any serious backsliding. So at an industry level, it just hasn't hit Australia in the same way. But as usual, internet culture has been less discriminating.
Social media is never just one thing. Like, it is just as easy to find a very elegant explanation of why this sort of extreme thinness is ridiculous on TikTok as it is to find someone promoting extreme thinness.
I also think it's worth talking about how those two camps, if we zoom in on TikTok as an example, are not like for like, because the helpful messaging that kind of calls out and challenges diet culture and pro-thin messaging, that is like labeled as such. That is all very clear in what it's trying to do. Fantastic. The other side, the kind of pro-thin messaging that we are seeing take greater prominence again, isn't clearly labeled at all. In fact, it's very cleverly disguised a lot of the time. And people are not saying the quiet part loud anymore. They are hiding it, possibly as a result of the more evolving conversation around body positivity that has taken place in the last decade.
Yeah, it's insidious because as we've become more sort of aware of size discrimination, body positivity, body neutrality, we've also learned to couch any of our conversations about thinness into the guise of wellness. So wellness is a wonderful disguise for being thin, being really thin sometimes. I've always been fairly skeptical of a lot of wellness culture because the first people I knew who were vegan, gluten-free, highly, highly obsessed with being well were models who would later admit that, in fact, that was an eating disorder. Eating a certain way, exercising a huge amount in order to pursue healthiness makes it seem like a virtue when in reality, it's just aesthetics. They learned to call it fitness. They learned to call it wellness. They learned to call it eating whole foods. It's much harder to debunk something that is dishonest in the way that it's coming to you.
Good morning, my beautiful people. We are going to make a smoothie.
Healthy, nutritious ingredients, so let's just jump right into it.
Did you know that there's more than 60 names that added sugar can hide under in your food?
Along with healthy eating habits and a workout routine, you will see the difference. It's such a simple recipe. It's just lemon, frozen fruit, spinach.
And valorizing thinness is really just fat phobia in disguise. And basically the person who I guess I would say radicalized me on this issue is an amazing writer and podcaster named Aubrey Gordon.
Aubrey, I would be so delighted if you would introduce yourself for us because you do so many cool things and I would love to hear you explain it.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Aubrey Gordon. I am an author and a podcaster. I've written 2 books, one called What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat, and the other one called You Just Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths About Fat People. And I am the co-host of a podcast called Maintenance Phase, where we look at usually bad science behind fad diets and wellness and weight loss trends.
And I feel like there are a lot of myth-busting books in the world where you hear the myth and then think, oh yeah, that did seem like a lie. But some of the ones Aubrey is knocking over are core parts of what we think of as conventional wisdom when it comes to body size.
A lot of them are what my co-host on the podcast, Michael Hobbs, calls zombie statistics. You try and trace down where they actually came from and where the research is sourced from, and you actually just can't. Or you find that actually that was a paper that was issued, for example, that said that 400,000 Americans just got so fat every year that we just dropped dead just from being fat. If you look back at that paper, it was actually retracted very quickly by the authors.
One of the main myths Aubrey deals with, which is incredibly prevalent, is the obesity epidemic and the body mass index, which you might know as the BMI.
What I will say about the quote-unquote obesity epidemic stuff, it is true that our bodies are getting bigger. We're getting fatter. We're also getting taller. Both of those things have been happening for decades and decades. Depending on the researchers you talk to, they'll trace that trend either back to the 1980s or back to the 1960s, sometimes a tiny bit further than that. There wasn't all of a sudden one day a big spike of fat people. There wasn't like a year when everybody got fat and all of a sudden there was an epidemic of fat people, right? Like that's not a thing that happened. What happened is that we have based our definitions of quote unquote overweight and obesity on the BMI, which is a tool that was never designed for individual healthcare provision, wasn't even designed by a healthcare provider, was designed by an astronomer from Belgium in the 1850s who based it off of French and Scottish military conscripts. So all men, all in the army. If you are not in the French army in the 1800s, the BMI was not designed for you. I don't know how to break this to you, right?
What?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding you.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah, no. He was an astronomer and statistician, and he used the data that was available to him, which was military data. And what he was trying to do was find the average man, which to him meant the ideal man. He's also credited as sort of paving the way for the eugenics movement through much of his work. So he's not like the best guy. He's not the guy you want to spend a bunch of time with, right? The way that the BMI became used in healthcare provision is that particularly American insurance companies in the early 1900s and late 1800s were looking for ways to charge some consumers more, to charge some policyholders more for their health and life insurance. And they did that in part by saying that fatter people should pay more. And they each had their own different charts of how they measured who was the fattest. And ultimately they decided to unify that by using the BMI as their sort of source code for who's really the fattest. It's worth knowing that in the BMI, quote unquote overweight and obesity are not defined by when there is an onset of increased health risks. They're defined as the 5 or 15% of the fattest among us, right? So they're defined in relation to other people historically, right? So again, we're not talking about this is the weight at which your health risks increase. We're saying these are the fattest people. Now let's look at why they're unhealthy, right? We've sort of reverse engineered research to justify our own conclusions.
It seems like the ultra thin look is being more overtly promoted in culture right now than it has been for a while. It's really back with a vengeance now. So I wanted to start with what you've been observing in the way of anti-fat messaging since this ultra thin look made its return in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, speaking only for myself, I don't notice a difference in how people treat me or how people respond to fat people, generally speaking, based on whether or not thin is in. My body type, I am a US size 26, has never been in. It's not going in, it's not going out. It's always out. It's always made very clear to me that I am out. So the sort of return of thin is in feels like it's something that has more profound impacts on people who have greater proximity to thinness, who are closer to thinness. I do worry as a person who has dealt with an eating disorder in my lifetime. I absolutely worry about the incidence of eating disorders that this can and will bring about. I absolutely worry about the dangerous choices that people do and will make to stay thin or get thinner. And I will say, just as a real live fat person, very fat, unquestionably, wherever you put me in the world, I'm a fat person. It doesn't feel super different.
I guess coming back to the impact, I wonder if in the absence of the kind of body positivity rhetoric for all its flaws, if it is kind of a shorter path almost to anti-fatness in the context of all this like pro-thin propaganda and messaging in the culture.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is a teeny tiny bit of research on this topic. There's one research paper that was written about thin white women in particular who participate in what's called body checking, which is essentially like checking your body against other people's bodies. And what they found was that for thin white women who participated in that behavior, if they also hold anti-fat biases, those anti-fat biases are self-protective. They make them feel better about themselves. So anti-fatness is actually how thin women who are outside of the very thin ideal often calm themselves down, is by looking at someone my size and going, well, at least I'm not that fat. That is sort of a way that this all subconsciously plays out for folks, whether we intend it to or not, is that when we put so much pressure on so many people to be as thin as possible, what that leads to is defining an in-group and an out-group, right? And the way that you define yourself as part of the in-group is by shunning and excluding the out-group, which is fat people, right? It doesn't feel good to say. It did not feel good to read. I can't imagine it feels good to hear, but that does appear to be the case based on what little research we have on that topic. It's a real bummer.
So the question I was asking at the outset was how we got to this place, despite the work of the body positivity movement. But talking to Aubrey, I realized that part of the reason we're here is because of how that movement mutated.
The tail end of that movement, I think you're right, was pretty ineffective, right? It's worth knowing that the roots of that movement actually exist in fat activism. Body positivity, as it was sort of originally envisioned by fat folks, particularly fat Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, and fat queer people, was a pretty radical social movement designed to sort of smash the barriers to equal care and equal access. And what happened was essentially that the way that most folks first encountered the movement was through advertising, was through companies picking up this idea of body positivity, not really knowing what the movement's roots were, but saying, that seems like a good thing. I feel like we could sell people some soap. So the way that most folks got exposed to body positivity was through advertising campaigns that were completely disconnected from the original movement. And as a result, lots and lots of people, particularly women, women who are not plus size, sort of flooded body positive spaces. And decided almost through free association what they thought body positivity meant, right?
We're just riffing out here. We're just going for it. Yeah.
Totally. Right? Which was like, I would like to feel positive about my body is how most people sort of took it.
Adding a belt is something really simple that I can do to cinch that dress, take in some of that fabric, highlight a tinier part of my body, and make it look so much more flattering, figure flattering, and slimming. And it's just a belt. It's so simple.
So what we got was a lot of people saying, I'm body positive, but not if you're fat. I'm body positive, but only if you really are paying attention and working out. I'm body positive, but only if you're happy and healthy. And what I would say to that is two things. One, chronically ill people deserve to love their bodies. So do disabled people. They don't look and track as like necessarily quote unquote healthy in everyone's eyes. They still deserve to feel good about their bodies. Ditto for people who are depressed and not always happy all the time. All of these are people who deserve to feel good in their skin. The unintended impact of embracing this idea that it's only for people who are happy and healthy means that if we don't interrogate what we think happy or healthy looks like, we keep excluding the people who need this movement space the most. And I think that, to my mind, is the biggest challenge and the biggest sort of stumbling block for the movement, is that we got so focused on how we feel about our own bodies that we took all of the social and political dynamics out of it and said, it's just about your mindset, right? You just need to feel better or feel differently about your body. But you only get to do that if you're happy and healthy, right? Which is too high a bar for most of us to meet all of the time, right?
It also relocates all the responsibility for change back with the individual, right? That approach that you just need to feel differently. And none of the problems are actually structural, which is kind of like a hallmark of a lot of these really radical campaigns and so-called changes that were going on in the 2010s, era, right? Is that it was this really promising rhetoric. And then it was like, oh, but it lies with the individual. Let's not look at the structural stuff.
Absolutely. There's no question. It feels like part of the fallout of that has been, for me as a fat person, in the era of body positivity, if I talk about something like getting kicked off of an airplane or a doctor refusing to treat me because of my size or what have you, the response that I get from very well-meaning people who are not plus size and have not been plus size is, you just need to love yourself more, without really reckoning with the fact that like that doctor or that flight attendant does not care how much I love my body.
Hi, beautiful soul. Listen to these body positive affirmations and repeat them so that they become part of you. Other people's opinions of my body are not relevant.
Me loving my body doesn't change someone else's actions toward me. That's going to take a different kind of work, and it's going to take a different kind of effort. And that is an effort that we have yet to collectively assert.
So if you want to know why pro-thin messaging returned, the answer is that it waltzed into the void created by the unmet promise of the body positivity movement. And that movement ultimately erected more barriers to people feeling good about their bodies, instead of tearing the existing ones down. And yeah, like I said to Aubrey, I do think there's kind of a pattern here with a lot of social change movements of the last decade that started in this really promising and radical way, thrived on social media, and were flooded by outsiders. You could argue fourth wave feminism suffered a similar fate when it mutated into what we now call girl boss feminism.
In some ways, it feels reminiscent of like, in the US, it would have been like the early 2010s when really a lot of straight people seemed to figure out that gay people were around and that they were big fans, right? Like it felt like a similar moment where you're like, oh, we got to kind of hang on to what we got here in order to keep this from being, again, sort of blown out.
And look, maybe void is too harsh a way to characterize where these movements are now, even if it doesn't feel like we've made a full 10 years worth of progress.
I don't know that I would say that it necessarily failed. I mean, I think there's no question that it was dramatically watered down, right? I think it paved the way for a lot of good things and a lot of conversations that we're able to have now that the sort of thin as in ideal is returning. We're able to return to that conversation at least a little bit more critically. And I think it is a brighter place. I mean, like, listen, man, now we've got Melissa McCarthy. Lizzo's here.
The Grammy goes to Lizzo for About Damn Time.
I look around and there's all these
songs that are about loving our bodies and feeling comfortable in our skin and feeling fucking good.
Things are a little bit better. You know what I mean? There are sort of more folks of more body types are showing up on screen. It is too little, too late, and too slow for my tastes. But there is like a little bit more happening, and that feels like not nothing, you know? Credit where credit's due, not nothing.
We did think about calling the episode Not Nothing, but we were worried you wouldn't listen. And we wanted you to listen because, like I said at the start, there are stakes. Also, how wild is that thing about the BMI? Last thing before I let you go, Aubrey, what advice do you have for people when they're confronting this in the wild?
Boy, oh boy, that's a great question. I myself have been spending a whole lot less time on the internet over the last year or so, a lot less time on social media. And I will tell you, the way the clouds are parting in my brain, right? Everything looks better with a little less time on social media. So I would just like invite folks to give yourself permission to be off social media for a short time or a long time, because that really does seem like sort of the bulk of it. So I would also invite folks to sort of take control of their own social media. Different platforms have different options for this. Instagram has an option for this where you can actually tell them what kinds of ads you want to have or don't want to have. And you can actually say, I don't want to see anything about weight loss on my feed. I just don't want to see that.
And if you do need support, there's a really useful helpline that's run by the Butterfly Foundation. The number is 1-800-33-4673. That is the last episode of this season of Schmeitgeist. Every single one has been made by me, Angela Lapierre, but also by the very talented Grant Walter, who has lovingly crafted every sound you hear, as well as co-producing the stories we tell, along with Elsa Silberstein. Elsa also reported on a number of episodes this season, including our 2-part investigation into the ADHD diagnosis wave. This podcast was made for ABC Everyday, and you can find all our episodes on the ABC Listen app. If you do need to balance out the vibes on this one, I highly recommend episode 3, where you can find out about a polyamorous witch who invented unicorns. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio, and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.
Hey, also, if you are enjoying Schmeitgeist, there is another ABC podcast that I cannot recommend highly enough. It is Ladies We Need to Talk, and they are back with a new season. Yumi Steins is the host. Yumi, I have seen the list of topics. They are all extremely good. What would you say is your favourite so far?
Well, I found it really easy to talk about the whole episode on female rage, why women are so angry right now. I did an interview with the really popular therapist Esther Perel. That's a whole episode that's coming up. And one that I found kind of traumatizing to record and talk about, Ange, was about choking during sex, which has kind of become so mainstream that people do it without seeking consent.
Choking without consent is assault. The discourse doesn't need to be a full sit-down conversation. And this is what I detest about hookup culture, is the lack of normalized communication, because it's so dangerous. And it often means that someone is compromising their sexual needs and safety.
I can't wait to hear that one. Guys, make sure you subscribe on the ABC Listen app. And Yumi, thank you so much.
No worries. It's called Ladies We Need to Talk, because ladies, we need to talk. Thanks, Ange.
Subscribe to listen to more free podcasts or download the ABC Listen app and stream ad-free.